Hello fellow crafters, Janine here, and today I'm bringing you another Darby Smart project. The project this month, for the month of August, was a resin cast bangle bracelet that included some dried natural materials. So I'm going to dive right in and show you how I made this bracelet. There's a couple of things that you're going to want to do before you start mixing your resin and start getting ready to pour. The first thing is, and I know the directions from Darby Smart don't say this, but given my past experience with resin casting, when you're working with a plastic mold such as this one instead of a silicone mold, you really need to use a cast and craft mold release conditioner. And what you do is you just spray this inside your mold, make sure you coat it really well, and then I usually turn it over a trash can and shake off the excess. You let it dry, and then you repeat the process and spray the mold again to and it will help to release the bracelet from the mold. And I can tell you, these type of molds, it is a little bit more difficult to release the project, but with a little patience it can be done, and once you have it released, you have a really beautiful little project. The second thing you're going to want to do is to make sure that your surface is level. In my case, the desk that I'm working on is not in the most level room of my house, so the desk itself is fairly unlevel. Well, it would be extremely difficult to level my desk. So what I did was just put my mold on, I just turned the bottom of a small box upside down and set my mold on top of it, and then I checked my leveling. I just have a small level just to see how level it is. I've got it pretty good right now, and you can tell which way you need to. And I just cut out pieces of cardboard. I have several pieces of cardboard that I cut up to use as shims to make my little box situation here level. So you can tilt your box one way or the other to see which way the bubble goes, and you'll know. Let me zoom in a little bit so you can see that a little better. So you can see that's actually pretty good, but you can, if I tilt the box that way, you can see the bubble goes that way, so that tells me if I need to put a shim under the right side of the box or if I tilt it the other way. And it ended up taking not very much of a piece of cardboard. I had quite a few pieces cut up, but anyway, I can move the shim. Let me zoom back out. I can move this shim this way or that way until that bubble lands pretty much right in between the two lines in the middle of the level, and then you want to check the level the other way also. And this one, so sometimes it's just really almost impossible to get them perfectly level, but I can see that if I move my mold to about the middle of the box, then that's pretty good. I've got it level in both directions, and that'll give us a good casting, because if it is unlevel, all of your resin is going to shift to one side, so you're going to have a very uneven project. It's going to be very thin on one side and thick on the other, and that's not what you want. So those are the first two tips that I really recommend, is make sure you're working on a level surface and make sure you condition your mold first. Okay, I went ahead and, according to the directions, put the little floral bits in the bottom of my mold. Okay, and I'm just pushing them down a little bit with the stir stick, because I'm also going to add, because I just wanted to have it to have a little more sparkle and shine, so I had this kind of iridescent opal kind of looking confetti, and when it's cast in resin, it's really pretty. It just has so much sparkle and it reflects light beautifully. So I'm just sprinkling some of that down in the mold also with the floral stuff. And again, with my stir stick, I'm just going to work it into the mold. Normally what I would do is mix this with the resin itself before pouring it in the mold. But I'm going to be doing some other stuff with the leftover resin, so I didn't want to have this in there for that stuff. So I'm just kind of mixing this around with the floral bits. And I'm curious to see how these floral bits are going to look, because my experience also with resin is that plant life, natural products change color in resin. They go through a chemical reaction and they just don't look as vibrant and bright. So I'm curious to see how this turns out. Okay, I've got about as much of that work down in there as going to go in there. So what I'm going to do is, by the way, this is Envirotech's jewelry resin, which makes sense because jewelry resin doesn't bubble as much, and the bubbles dissipate much better than other resin products I've used. So it makes sense that you would want to use this, particularly with something that's going to be fairly clear when it's all over with. But I'm going to go ahead and mix up all but about a half of an ounce, or about a quarter of an ounce each, on these 2 bottles. And they're an ounce each, so I'm going to go ahead and mix up 3/4 of an ounce of each product. And I'm using their little measuring cups measured out, which I do recommend, because the resin does have to be in an equal, exact, just about exact measurement of 1 to 1. I'm going to go ahead and pour that in a separate cup to mix. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and measure out the second part, which is the hardener. This is the resin part. The second part is the hardener. And I'm going to go ahead and measure it and mix it in. And they say to stir for 2 minutes, then let it sit for 2 minutes, pour into a separate cup, and stir for 2 more minutes. So once I've done all that stirring, I'll come back and show you the pouring it in the mold, because I'm pretty sure you don't want to sit here and watch me stir. Okay, I've mixed the resin and I've let it set for a couple of minutes. And I'm going to go ahead and pour all but a couple of millimeters to the top. Honestly, don't really know what a couple of millimeters looks like, so I'm just going to pour this around. And just make sure that that's covered for the most part, and leave a little head space. And I'm going to go ahead and set this on my level surface, because it said to let this set for 20 minutes and then come in with a stir stick, and if any of the little bits and bobs of the floral stuff is sticking up, just to push it down a little bit with the stir stick after 20 minutes, and then let it set overnight. So I'm going to put this aside on my level box for 20 minutes, and we'll come back to see if any of those things have floated to the top. Okay, it's been 20 minutes and we did get a little bit of rising up of some of the product here, so I'm just pushing it down. But honestly, it's not too bad. Everything is, for the most part, staying put. And the resin is already really, really thick, so when I push it down, I'm pretty positive it's going to stay there. Okay, well, I'm going to let this set overnight now, and we'll come back in the morning and pour the second layer of resin. Okay, I've let this set overnight and harden, and so now it's ready for the second layer, and this one's going to be not quite as thick because we're just kind of topping it off. And so I've already mixed the resin, again, equal parts of the hardener and the resin. and then let it sit for a couple minutes to let some of the bubbling come to the surface. And hopefully that last little bit of bubbling. If all these bubbles don't pop, then what I can do is very carefully, because this is not a silicone mold, but very carefully just kind of run a lighter around it really quick and pop those bubbles. So that's it. Again, we wait. I'm going to set this back on its level surface and give it overnight again, and then tomorrow hopefully we should be able to get it unmolded and sanded around the edges. So I'll see you back here tomorrow. Okay, this has sat overnight again, and now it's time to unmold it. And I can tell you from previous experience, getting these little bangle bracelets out of these molds is not that easy, but they showed in the picture to press with your thumbs, so I'm guessing they just push the middle out like so, and then you got to try and loosen it from all the around the edge, and it just takes time and effort. Be prepared to have some patience with this, because it's going to take a little effort to get this out. And I can't even imagine trying to do this without having sprayed it with mold release first. So I'm surprised that wasn't in the package, or at least, you know, a small amount of it. And it's still just a little bit soft. In other words, it's hard in that it's set up, but it's still just a little bit pliable. I can bend it, so it probably needs to set a little bit longer. But you have to break that seal all the way around, and the only way to do that is just to keep pulling at it. But I'm worried about what it's going to do to the shape of the mold. Yeah, that's probably still going to be okay to use again. Just pressed it back out. Okay, now I have some, let's see if you can see that a little bit better. Where the resin kind of overpoured, and because it's still somewhat soft, that's going to be easy enough to deal with. I'm just going to get some scissors and just trim that little bit off. And the next part of the directions called for taking a fine grit sandpaper and sanding this down, and I can see why, because you're going to have a little bit of a sharp edge, whereas the edge that was in the mold is quite smooth and won't, you know, scratch you going on your arm, but this side would probably scratch you with that, because once it continues to harden, that's going to get sharper and harder. So they included a piece of sandpaper, but I'm going to go ahead and cut it into smaller pieces just to make it easier to work with on this small piece. And they call for you to just sand it all the way around these edges to smooth them out. And I can tell you right now that's going to take a while, so I'm going to go ahead and work on that and come back and show you the finished product. And I'm thinking too, it's also going to make the surface a little bit cloudy. So if it does that, and I'm really pretty sure it will, then what I'm going to do is take it outside and just spray the piece with some clear enamel spray paint, and that should give it a nice gloss again. So I'm going to keep sanding on this and come back. Oh, and the other thing I want to say is my instincts were absolutely correct. All the floral material, that is natural materials, did change color in the resin, and not necessarily in a pleasant kind of way. You'll see in the close-up pictures what it looks like. So I'm really glad I included that iridescent confetti in there, because that really saved the look of it, gave it some sparkle and shine, and made it look a little nicer, because otherwise it would look like I just had a bracelet full of dead stuff. Okay, I finished sanding and got this much smoother, and honestly I would still just really like it if these edges were rounded out a bit more, but I did the best I could with hand sanding. I really think a rotary tool would just make such quick, easy work of that. And it did leave it just a little cloudy looking, so I did go back over it. I did just take some of that clear enamel spray paint and finished it up, and so it's nice and shiny and glossy just like we want it to be, and it looks great. Again, I'm just really happy that I included that iridescent confetti. I think that just made all the difference in the world. So that is this all for this Darby Smart project, everything except the scoring. Okay, for the value of the box, I gave it a 5 because resin molds and resin, the epoxy resin, 2-part epoxy resin, whereas you only had 2 ounces of it, it's still pretty expensive, and the molds are expensive, and then plus they included the floral and then the measuring cups and the stir sticks. So that, with the shipping, I think this was well worth the $20 that we paid for it. And for ease of use, I'm scoring them a little bit low. I'm sorry, for instructions I'm scoring them a little bit low. I'm giving them a 3 because there are some things I feel like that were really missing from the instructions. First off was the fact that you really do need a mold release spray. It really does help for getting this out, and you know, to condition the mold. And then about the, you know, pushing the stuff back down, actually I found that it sank more to this end of the mold, which is, it was like this in the mold, so it leaves kind of a bit of a gap between the product inside and the second pouring of resin. So I feel like there was still just a little bit missing from the instructions. Ease of use, I mean, it's really, if you can measure things evenly and pour them in, it's really not that difficult, so I gave it a 4 for ease of use, and overall finished product gets a 4. So the total score for this project is a 4, an overall score of 4. Well, anyway, if you enjoyed seeing this Darby Smart project and you would like to continue to see monthly Darby Smart projects, give me a thumbs up. Please remember to rate, comment, and subscribe. And as always, you have a very blessed day.